you're interested in expanding your universe, each one of them will have something that's interesting and new.
It all takes place in the space of less than an hour.
The questions were very knowledge-based. Take the work hat off, look at something cool, and think about things in a different way.
So I'll introduce our speaker for today. So it's a great privilege to introduce Francis Cram from MapStand. And perhaps, Francis, if you could just initially tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what you're talking about today.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you all for joining us today. Yes, so I'm Francis. I'm a founder of MapStand. MapStand has been around for nearly 2 years now, and we launched our first product last autumn. Prior to MapStand, I've worked in the industry for over 15 years now in both the service sector and for oil companies. For the best part of that, I worked for a small E&P company focused in the North Sea called Hansa Hydrocarbons. We explored mainly in the gas basin, and it was during this time that the ideas for MapStand really came about. Despite being in a mature basin, a very data-rich environment, we as a small company really struggled to track what was going on around us, to use the excellent open data sets from the OGA and other surrounding countries effectively. We bought expensive subscriptions to try and access this information, to streamline our processes, to track our competitors and other companies, to understand activities. But we, it's fair to say, failed. And we thought there must be a better way of managing this information in companies like Hansa. And we saw this repeated throughout many smaller companies and larger companies, with high costs, wasted resources, missed opportunities. And the services provided, we felt really weren't what was expected from a modern and sort of dynamic environment. The dream really of MapStand, and when we started it, was to do something very new. We thought that the basic information about the oil and gas industry, the location of the licenses, the wells, where fields are, where data sets are, that this really should be part of public record. People should know where this is. The industry requires, to work effectively, the ability to see where assets are, to see where activities will be taking place. And with this great aim in mind, we launched MapStand to build essentially a global version of what we have in the UK through the OGA, the basic information on the activities of the industry. And in October, we launched our web app, which you can all log on for free, and you will be able to see our global map and the progress we have made. We track the licenses and concessions of oil companies around the world, the locations of fields and also prospects, the locations of wells, but also upcoming activities like planned wells, infrastructure, pipelines, platforms, terminals, seismic, rigs, vessels, you name it. We're finding this information and we're putting it on the map, and we're sharing it with anyone who logs in and the whole industry. We also track news. We have a work program for geotagging this news, daily updated news feeds, working out the entities within the news, anything that is mentioned, and dynamically updating our content. Just to give you a quick taster of our global data sets, here we can see our global license map. Here, global seismic surveys, beautifully highlighting the continental shelves around the world. Here, global infrastructure, pipelines, terminals, rigs, all the bits of metal that the industry places around the world, we try and find and track. Here we can see rigs and vessels. These are dynamically updated using satellite and AIS positioning. And zooming closer in, here we are looking just off the coast of Mexico to a very active area. We see the detail that we're tracking: wells, prospects, planned wells, and the details of all the pipelines in the fields. And this detail can be seen all the way around the world as we build out our data sets. For our users, this is available through our web app. So you go onto mapstand.com. This is how it would look on your phone. And what you can see here is a user searching, in this case, for Premier Oil. And the map automatically filters out and only shows you the assets of the company or country you are searching for. In this case, you can see on the map we have some FPSOs, some rigs that are contracted, some planned wells. We also see a filtered news feed highlighting the company's latest news. And zooming in, you can see individual areas that a company is operating. And this is available for all of the companies operating around the world. You have, all of you, this ability now in your pocket to analyze the industry in incredible detail. So the big question is, how is it possible to build a global database of the E&P industry? This is an enormous task of digitization, and one that we are taking on. As we look around the world, open data is really still in its infancy. We have now, I think, 42 countries where we have access to basic information on the location of licenses of wells, and also more detailed information. For instance, lots of countries now publish production data. As we move around the rest of the world, we see a sliding scale where some countries will publish static digital data sets but not update them, or others where there is no data at all. We see, as we look and analyze companies, some of them, especially listed companies, will disclose a huge amount on their activities, but then many private companies provide no public disclosure at all. So we are left with a very mixed picture, and what we are left with is an enormous task that would require an army of people to complete. So what are the other tools that we have at our disposal? Well, automation. This is one of the key things that we work on at MapStand in order to make this data set. We build ETL scripts to run all the data from all of the 42 countries where we have digital access, and we do this every single day, updating our data sets daily. But as we go to places where there is no real data, we have another secret weapon: crowdsourcing. As our app is free to access, we have thousands of users now using our system, and they feed back all kinds of details that we may have missed, or events that we didn't pick up, or where there was no news. And we get daily feedback now from all over the world. But we have other eyes that are looking at our industry. And this is something that is becoming more and more important, with startups all over the world bringing out new products: satellite data. We use satellite data extensively for analyzing the industry. We use the AIS, satellite AIS, for tracking vessels. We use flare tracking for understanding whether a gas discovery has been made, or whether a field is currently producing, or whether refineries are working. We also use image data, such as Sentinel satellite data, for understanding where activity is, finding well paths, improving the accuracy of our data. But we're also working on machine learning and natural language processing, which is part of how we manage our news feed, and understand how this unstructured information can be structured and the location information extracted. This is an example here of our rig tracking. Oh, excuse me for 1 second. Here we can see the drilling rigs over the past nearly 6 months. What we can see is the clustering where the rigs are stopping for drilling purposes or maintenance or whatever they are doing. We can also see after their jobs, they zip around the world to different locations. What we have clustered here is the activity of the rigs over the past 6 months. And you can very clearly see the hotspots in the industry where the most activity is happening. Rig tracking is very important to us. It tells us where activities are. It tells us when they're finished, when they've started. And we also use it to automatically and dynamically update some of our content. Flare tracking is another important component of our data set. The flare tracking data is available actually for free. And here we can see an example from West Africa showing again the satellite data on the flares, but in the graph, and I hope you can see this, we have actually highlighted which companies here are flaring and how much they've actually been flaring in BCM. We can see ahead of the leaderboard here, we have ENI, Exxon, Nigerian Petroleum Development Company, Total, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, Perenco. All of these companies that are currently flaring as part of their activities. Flaring is a very hot topic at the moment. We have the Zero Flaring by 2030 initiative, where a lot of companies are signing up to try and reduce or even end all flaring, which is a very important part as we grapple with our environmental impact as an industry. Flare tracking is also important for refinery activity, or maybe more excitingly, to understand whether a gas discovery has been made and flared. And we look at this using satellite data to update and dynamically change our data sets. Here's a case study. This is a company, Capterio, one of our customers. They do an absolutely amazing thing. They are a project developer that deliver flare capture projects. This can be as part of flare optimization or monetization, where they're looking at ways of reducing flaring and actually making money in the process, either through enhanced oil recovery or bringing the gas to market. Capterio use our data and our global license layers as part of their opportunity screening, seeing where flares there are taking place, who is operating there, where the nearby infrastructure is, and trying to understand what opportunities there are to reduce flares, which is a real blight on our industry. This is another way that the MapStand data is used. Here, another one of our customers, Icon Science, are using it as a dynamic dashboard in order to see which companies are currently active and operating in an area where they have one of their pressure studies, here in the deep water Gulf of Mexico. This image here is from our hub product, which is our product that we offer to companies, where you can build interactive and dynamic dashboards and maps from our data set in order to visualize and build all kinds of different tools or apps to support your business. So I posed a question at the beginning: how do we digitize an industry? And the real answer is it's incredibly hard. We have an industry spread all over the world. In lots of parts of it have very poor or no data release. We are helped ever more and more by amazing computer power and algorithms. We also have satellite data. So the challenges we face today are maybe a little easier than they were in the past, but still we really need to engage people. And one of the key things about MapStand is engaging a community of people to come together and support us and help us build this data set. And in return, this data set is free for everyone to access through our portal. And we also make it available to students and supporting startups to really try and use this data In the UK, we're in an amazingly privileged position to have data sets, for instance, from the OGA, that we can use for analysing, understanding the industry, for building companies and ideas, for testing out ideas. We're taking these data sets from local to global. And when you are all, and your startups, the companies at the OGTC are looking to go global as well, we want to be there to support them, and our data sets are there. Well, thank you all. That is the end of my presentation. Just to finish, I'd just like to describe this final map. Yesterday, we released the first draft of our global basin layer. This is a collaboration that we've been doing with an amazing company, Geologist. And this basin layer now is available for you all to see and interrogate. It's actually based on their sea-based depth to basement map. So this is a hugely unique and new data set. And it's absolutely wonderful to scroll around the map and actually see which parts and where basins are covered by industry activity. Thank you very much for listening.
Great. Thank you, Francis. Interesting presentation. And, you know, OGTC, we're very keen on building data sets that can support the industry and, in fact, collaborate and share around data. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we invited you to talk about some of the things you can get out of it, but also some of the challenges in doing it. Now, I'd just like to invite people to raise their hand. We have a few questions in the chat, but just wondered if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question. Okay, so we haven't had anyone yet, so I will look at the questions in the chat. So I think the very first one, which is a very useful and actually I'm sure it's quite a challenging aspect for you, is how do you verify and QC your data? Because you're relying on data sets that potentially are not accurate either in some way. You know, it's an accuracy, it's or a location, or it's some other aspect of quality.
Yes, it's an excellent one, and something that we grapple with every single day. We obviously have data sets that come on very different frequencies and qualities. Our automated data sets, you know, we often only see when things go wrong once they've gone wrong, where, you know, our processes and algorithms have pulled data from a server, and you know, suddenly it's not where it's supposed to be, it's in space somewhere. And as part of this, we've had a long learning process by which we've built progressively more and more checks and balances to try and pick out all of these potential errors that come through the automated processes. Where we have manual or harder to access data, we are constantly improving them and trying to understand them better. Also build relationships with government agencies and companies to try and find and access official data sets of higher quality. So as you move around our maps, we will always tell you where we got our data from and really what we think of it. And that's something that I think is very important, and something that I always found very frustrating with the black box data sets that the industry so often uses. You do need to know the provenance of your data, the accuracy of it, when it was updated, and all of these together, you know, enable you to make a judgment call on how usable it is for your application. Our data sets are enormously varied around the world, but improving every day.
Okay. And do you develop automated sort of quality algorithms that run across your data sets, or is it, you know, you do it as you import data?
We do both. I guess, you know, the things that we're trying to develop in the future is integrating more of the satellite data as part of the QC. Both historic and sort of real-time data, but yeah, it's a constant challenge.
Okay, Just remind to everyone, please raise your hand. We all tried it at the beginning, so I know you know how to do it. But anyway, so we still haven't had anyone raising their hand, but we've got plenty of questions in the chat. On your drilling slide, you showed the clusters largely offshore. So there is a question about what about onshore drilling? Do you have data sets for that?
Onshore drilling is a lot harder to track, as you all appreciate. So we currently do not track land rigs, like Baker Hughes provide data sets for in the States, for instance. Having said that, US land rigs have a lot of information available in the public domain. In terms of onshore drilling, we do, where we know activities occurring, look at satellite data to find drill pads, for instance, and things like that, and actually find the rigs to understand and place the wells on our maps. But this is definitely an area where we are looking to improve over time, especially in development drilling, which is hard to track both onshore and offshore.
Okay, thank you. So Naslie's raised her hand, so I'm going to allow you to yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi.
I'm not sure if this is working or not. Okay,
It's
perfect.
working.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think that's a great, piece of presentation. I've having worked in my previous roles. Obviously, I worked in the operator and a service company. As I was working in the service company, I realized, I was the end user for the data, and I was trying to mine the data in such a way that I could say, use the data, slice and dice it to justify, say, a piece of business case, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to it, obviously, this is a great piece of database that you've got this massive, data which I see almost like a big pie. So when it comes to going and entering certain markets and justifying a business need in this particular part of the world, you need to slice and dice the data. And it's good that we've got the rigs, and I love the fact that we can now see the gas flaring, and it's always key, for the operators to understand where they are in terms of the flaring consents, etc.
Yeah.
That's a great piece of work. And now looking at the wells, and I've worked with, plenty of data sets, from, for instance, in the UK, we've got National Data Repository, we've got the OGA, they've got a fantastic piece of data. In Norway, we've got the public data, obviously. So coming back to my question, we really need to drill it down to the particulars of the wells. And have you got any work in that? For instance, the active wells and the shut-in wells. Going now into the point, that exactly how much of the well stock is active or shut in, so that you can understand, how much of the capacity is actually, working. And later on, now we've got this massive incentive towards, obviously optimizing the production from the shut-in wells as well, then drilling it down to further detail and understand, which one of the shut-in wells are shut-in as to why. We know in the UK, for instance, the OGA data shows us that, some of the wells are shut due to scaling, integrity, this and that. And if we could just eventually almost use a color coding on this, it would be amazing to understand, where the capacity is down and as to why, then, the solutions can be produced and certain solutions can be capitalized in those areas. I'm not sure if this is even possible.
The question there, I guess, is for Francis. So let's get him to try and answer your question. I think it's, can we identify wells? Can we identify shut-in wells? And then even then in the future, can we drill down to more information?
Indeed. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, no. Thank you for the question, and you raised a lot of interesting points there. I think, in the UK, maybe we're not following so closely what is happening onshore US. and there is the most amazing rich data set published at state level. These data sets provide amazing information on the statuses of these drilling arrays that they drill, thousands and thousands of wells. We're currently working on our US data set. It's millions of wells. And there you really can start to understand a lot of that. And we were quite late to on US onshore land, as it's such a huge challenge. But I guess to answer your question, for us to be able to report this, we need to have a source of information. Where there are active flares associated with production, we can work out whether these wells or these drilling areas are active or not, and when they're open and when they're not. Where there are no flares or in gas production, we really rely on the local regulators to make this data set available, or if that is not the case, for operators to disclose this information. And this is just not happening in most of the world. We can model the production based on the disclosures that are available, but these are very low resolution data sets. The sort of resolution of data that you're asking about it is a real challenge, but it is one that we will take on if the data lets us.
Okay, thanks, Francis. So Dave Russell has raised his hand to ask a question. So Dave.
Thanks, Stephen. And can I first of all congratulate Francis on such a clear and easily followed presentation. My question is really in two parts. Firstly, I'll own up to nothing more than a basic awareness of GIS systems. So is it fair to say that MapStand is a GIS consultancy? And the second part of the question is it a fundamental part of your business model that all your assignments end up in the public domain?
I mean, we're not a consultancy as such. The way that our business is structured, essentially, we have our open portal, which is open to anyone in the world to come on and look and analyze and play with this data. To actually access the underlying digital data, we supply this as a subscription. This is available to all sizes of companies, and it's, as far as I'm aware, a fraction of the price of some of the sort of existing providers in the industry. And that is essentially how we gain our revenue. Our customers, and I highlighted a few of them in our case studies, access our data through a specific portal where they can build and analyze our data in their browsers. In terms of the license under which our data is licensed, it's essentially modeled on an open data license. So once you've licensed our data, you can use it to innovate, to build products, to rework into your own systems, and there is no requirement to delete this data as long as you comply with our license. So this is a big change in the way that these global sort of data sets are provisioned to the industry, and we really want to support innovation and use of our data. We believe this is public domain information, should be so, and we don't want to stop people using it.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, some great questions. Okay, so another question from the chat stream, maybe one you can answer quite quickly. Does MapStand track offshore helicopter activity? I mean, I guess vessel information is out there, but I'm not sure about helicopter information actually, so interesting question.
It's a really good question. We don't currently, however, there are a lot of rigs, especially in, for instance, in Southeast Asia, that don't have AIS transponders, so we don't know where they are. We sometimes they pop up when we know they're drilling, but we're not actively tracking them. And one of the things that we've been looking at is using supply vessels or helicopters in order to sort of triangulate and pinpoint where activities are that are blind to us. So it is something that we're actively looking at, and it's actually a very, very useful data set for enriching other data sets. So hopefully in the future we'll be incorporating that.
Good. Okay, another question from Ian Craig. Do you have plans to include natural data sets such as seabed bathymetry and meta-ocean conditions?
Bathymetry is actually one of the most asked for things in terms of what people want to see. Yes, at some point we will be bringing that in, and at a sort of a very basic level, using some of the globally available data sets, the GEBCO data set, for instance. What was the second part?
Meta-ocean conditions.
Yeah. Again, interesting. This is not an area that we're sort of going into directly. We receive a lot of information about current conditions, for instance, through the AIS data as well, and there is a huge amount of data available. It may be an area we expand to in the future to bring these data sets in. Really, the best thing to do is to sign up and to send us a request into our support, and we will hopefully, as more and more people request the same things, really be able to prioritize them. We are an agile organization. We want to build solutions that work for all of you. So, please, feed back to us, and we can, we can get on with doing that.
I guess the question in a similar vein, in terms of what you can build on top of the platform. A question from Stephen Shield: is it possible to map emissions in a basin? So flaring plus other methane emissions. So I guess building on the flaring concept.
Yes. So we've seen some excellent satellite data sets, and also other sort of startups and companies mapping other types of emissions at actually incredible resolution. What we really see is MapStand providing an additional data set to, for instance, people that are already experts in this field. The data sets on activity ownership, who is operating, where they're operating, and together, putting these data sets together enables you to both hold people to account, but maybe also to spot areas where you can improve your own activities, create efficiencies within your own systems. We're not watching the industry and trying to disclose them. We're trying to help everybody make this a better and safer and greener industry.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. We're beginning to come towards the end. We've got about 2 minutes left. So, I think it was a great question from Ewan White. Francis, where will you take this, platform in the future, and what's next? So what, I guess I'll flip that around. What's next, and where will you take it in the future?
We really started out as focusing fully on the oil and gas industry, and even a few years ago it felt like there was more than enough time and activity for us to have a lifetime doing that. Very quickly, though, we've had more and more people asking us about how our technologies and our ideas can be applied to other industries. We already track wind farms as part of our basic data sets. This was initially done because these are other stakeholders in areas such as the North Sea, where a lot of activity is, and it's very important to know and maybe even share resources. However, we are also potentially looking at expanding into other natural resources, mining brines, helium, hydrogen, very similar industries that use, similar supply chains and also similar techniques to map and analyze them. So watch this space. We still haven't finished oil and gas, so we have a lot of work to do. So we won't be moving into new industries immediately, but we are very, very interested in applying technology as we build it to other industries.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. I think there was one other question, but unfortunately we've come to the end of our period of time. Could you, Francis, could you just move on to the next slide, the last slide in the pack? I'd appreciate it.
Oh,
doesn't seem to have moved. Really, so yeah, slide 20 there. So the point of doing that is, well, I just wanted to thank everyone for turning up, for raising their hands, for the 2 people who did. It's very brave. People in the questions, some great questions. I just want to remind you, we're going to, post this up on LinkedIn so you can ask Francis some other questions. There's a couple more coming through. So please do that. Obviously you don't have to do that immediately. You could do it over the next few days. That'd be good. The QR code there on the slide. That's if you scan that, it'll take you to our upcoming Tech20 schedule. Next one is Friday next week, obviously at 11 a.m. That is. I encourage people to sign up. They've been really good, very popular. And today's no exception. Thank everyone for turning up. Have a great day, have a great weekend. And last of all, thank you very much to Francis and MapStand for your presentation. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.